Right, welcome to a video or YouTube that may upset some people, but nevertheless I've travelled extensively through Queensland, up to Cairns, up to Currumbra on the Gulf, up to Darwin, right across the territory, and we're now in Western Australia, outback Western Australia. And I think it's time we talked about the Aboriginal people and what's happening. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a proud Indigenous Australian man. How do I know? There's only two sexes, male and female. If you can't tell if you're male or female, you're not going to get far in the world. Indigenous, I was born to this country, it's the only home I know. And it's time to talk about history and the Aboriginal people. There is no such thing as First Nation. First Nation is a term coined in Canada, not in Australia, not to represent Australian Aboriginals. So let's forget and not bother mentioning any of that so-called First Nations business. We also don't need to rewrite history. And I'd like to introduce you to an author who is world renowned for the work that she did on the Aboriginal people, especially the people of Western Australia. And that's why I'm doing this video here, the Pitjantjatjara tribes. And she's been highly rated around the world, but now there's a move to disassociate, revoke, remove, archive, or anything, her work. And we're talking about the anthropologist Daisy Bates. Daisy Bates was born in Ireland, emigrated to Australia, returned for studies to the UK, then came back to Australia. In Australia, not only was she an author, an anthropologist, a philanthropist, but she was also a cattle station owner. So she came to have very close associations with the local Aboriginal people and the tribes that passed through. Now, like I said, there was never a nation, there's tribes that passed through the property. So Daisy Bates wrote a number of books. I suggest you go and read 1, 2 or 3 of them. Now, if you go to your local library and ask for any books by Daisy Bates, don't be surprised if you're met with a blank look. Just be very nice to the person and tell them to use the Dewey system and look up Daisy Bates. If they say it's archived, as we were told at the Coffs Harbour Library, tell them to go and unarchive it. Bring it out. If you think that's too much trouble, then there's other things. There's Dymocks, Angus and Robinson, Booktopia, without even going to eBay or Gumtree, where you can buy the books that Daisy Bates wrote. Now, why are they trying to do away with what Daisy Bates wrote? It's real life fact. She talks about cannibalism and the Aboriginal people. Yes, that was right, cannibalism. It happens in many tribes around the world. And not even tribes, you only have to look back to the airline crash in the Andes. The soccer team, they became cannibals to survive. Now, the Aboriginal people, being hunters and gatherers, realised very quickly, the same as Eskimos, that old people and sometimes babies just can't be maintained. So cannibalism was a right of the Aboriginal people. Same as the Eskimo people with their old people. When they're no longer any use to the people, they sit them outside and they either freeze to death, or the polar bear that supplies the clothing, the food, eats the person, and then they kill the polar bear, and then you've got nourishment, clothing, all those type of things. So Daisy Bates is well worth looking up. And she's also famous for a couple other things. Daisy Bates, at one time, her husband was Breaker Morant. And there's a wonderful movie out on Breaker Morant. Without taking too long, Breaker Morant got his name Breaker because he's a horse breaker here in Australia, originally an Englishman. Lived on property, was a famous horse breaker, so Harry became Breaker Morant. He joined the British military to fight the Second Boer War, and despite no prisoners to be taken, he was court-martialed by the British. No defence lawyers or team was given to him, and him and one of the lieutenants that was with him were executed. The other lieutenant was imprisoned, but later that was commuted. In fact, about 2 years later, 1904, I think from memory, that was commuted. So it was a cover-up, like so much that our government does over the past and these days. Now, I've just spent literally hours and hours on this trip talking to local stockmen, local Aboriginals, people who don't want to be identified because of the positions they hold. They all say the same thing. We're treating our Aboriginals very badly. Now, we spend over $1 billion a year on the Aboriginal industry. We have a Minister for Indigenous Affairs who used to walk around in furs, and we've got Lydia Thorpe who puts on furs and yells and screams at the King and things like that. No, these people going back less than a lifetime, most of them were employed on the local properties. Stockmen. I was talking to one property manager today, had 201 Aboriginals working on the property. Their health was looked after, their food was looked after, their education was looked after, and then the government says, you've got to pay these people the award wage. Well, there's no way the property could afford to pay 201 people the award wage, so they let them go. What happened to the people? They drifted into the towns, and now they're third, fourth, even fifth generation unemployable. Yes, I did say unemployable. They don't know what work is, so there's no work ethic. There for a while, they had a card that could be used to support food, alcohol, things like that. That's now the basic card has been changed back to no alcohol, no cigarettes, and that certainly helps, but it doesn't get them any dignity as people to get up in the morning, go and find a tree to sit under, go and sit outside the local service station, or go and sit outside this local supermarket and have nothing to do until it's time to sleep somewhere and wait for the next government payment. So politicians have got a lot to answer for, and there's things that could be done, but the industry is so great that those at the top end of it who want the money don't really want to help the Aboriginal people. So the money gets wasted on programs, buildings that never get used, wages, charter flights, you name it, and the money's wasted. Whereas the genuine outback Aboriginal person suffers immensely in the meantime. So there's a few thoughts. And having mentioned Daisy Bates, if you haven't already written the name down, write it down, Daisy Bates. There is also a set of 3 books that Angus and Robinson have reprinted. They're the submissions to the Victorian Parliament on truth telling and things like that. They were so realistic, the examples, real life resumes, that the Truth Commission refused to accept them. So Angus and Robinson printed about 4,000 copies. I believe they sold out in the first 4 days. But they've reprinted it, Angus and Robinson. I can't remember the name of the books, but there's 3 in the series. Actual research papers that were prepared for the Victorian government, and then because it didn't suit the narrative, they banned them from being presented to the Truth Commission. So Daisy Bates and those 3 books from Angus and Robinson. Find out, don't just accept what the ABC wants to tell you. The Aboriginal people will only have a future if we help give them that future by allowing them to find employment, dignity, education and advance their own cause as members of Australia, not putting tribe against tribe, not putting blackfellas against whitefellas, not putting immigrants against Australians, not putting immigrants against Aboriginals. We're all one country, should be united under one flag and one voice. So there's a few thoughts for you as we look at this peaceful Western Australian river that in flood times, where I'm standing some 40 metres above the bank, would spill out. So just think about what we're doing, what can be done, and let's do it. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell us your thoughts.